Hello YouTube. Welcome to my new channel, The Inconsistent Reader. So the first book I've decided to review is Margaret Atwood's sequel to The Handmaid's Tale, The Testaments. So if you have read the first book or watched the show up to this point, you're good to go. If you have not at least watched the show, I would suggest not watching this unless you really just don't care and you just want to hear about this book. Okay, so in the first book, as you know, June is the main character, and she has a daughter, Hannah, who gets taken away from her and placed into a different family. And then she has another daughter, Nicole, with one of the eyes, Nick. Okay, so I forgot to read the dust jacket. As you see, I've already taken my lipstick off, and I'm not putting it on just to read the dust jacket because it's a lip stain. And if you know about lip stains, you know they're a pain in the ass to get off. So it's just going to be spliced in with me having no lipstick in the middle. I'm sorry, but I need to read the dust jacket of this book. Okay, so Margaret Atwood's dystopian masterpiece, The Handmaid's Tale, has become a modern classic, and now she brings the iconic story to a dramatic conclusion in the stunning sequel. 15 years after the events of The Handmaid's Tale, the theocratic regime of the Republic of Gilead maintains its grip on power, but there are signs it is beginning to rot from within. At this crucial moment, the lives of three radically different women converge, with potentially explosive results. Two have grown up on opposite sides of the border, one in Gilead as the privileged daughter of an important commander, and one in Canada, where she marches in anti-Gilead protests and watches news of horrors on TV. The testimonies of these two young women, part of the first generation to come of age in the new order, are braided with the third voice, that of one of the regime's enforcers, a woman who wields power through the ruthless accumulation and deployment of secrets. Long-buried secrets are what finally bring these three together, forcing each of them to come to terms with who she is and how far she is willing to go for what she believes. As Atwood unfolds the stories of the women of the Testaments, she opens up our view of the innermost workings of Gilead in a triumphant blend of riveting suspense, blazing wit, and virtuistic world building. Okay, so that's the dust jacket. Okay, so in this episode, I'm going to discuss Act 1, which is called Statue, and it's the first 5 chapters of the book. And I have a little script over here, so I'm going to be looking off to the side to read it. Okay, so here we go. Chapter 1, The Ardua Hall Holograph. So we open on someone talking about getting a statue while still being alive and how it terrifies her. I mean, it's a lot to live up to. To be revered while being alive, I'm sure it's a lot of pressure to make sure you're always doing the right thing, saying the right thing, being the right thing, you know? So here she's seen overanalyzing every inch of her statue. And it's not just her on the statue. There's also a pearl girl, a handmaid, and a young girl holding her hand that's been sculpted with her, which she feels overcrowds the statue. She feels it'd be better if it focused just on her. But she is happy she doesn't look crazy like some of the other work the sculptress has done. While she looks herself over, she's clearly pained. And then I do a quote right here. Hanging from a belt around my waist is my taser. This weapon reminds me of my failings. Had I been more effective, I would not have needed such an implement. The persuasion in my voice would have been enough. So she feels if she could have been more commanding, more persuasive, she wouldn't have needed to physically harm the girls. Now, in everything we've seen, heard, and maybe even done, one must be broken down before they can be built back up in the way that you want them to be built. And in some instances, this only works with the stick and not the carrot. Some people are really strong-willed. So whoever this is, whoa. So whoever this is, we can clearly see she's tortured about her life choices. Now the statue has now been here about 9 years and it's starting to get mossy and worn, and there are various offerings: eggs for fertility, oranges for the fullness of pregnancy, and bread for the moon. What's hilarious to me is that she pockets the oranges from her statue. So she shares with us that she's writing all of this down, which, as you know, women are not allowed to read and write unless they are aunts. So she's writing everything down in her private sanctum inside the Ardrell Hall Library, which is one of the few libraries even left in all of Gilead. So she seems to be at the point here where old skeletons are pounding on the closet door and she's just ready to let them loose. Like, she feels like she's on her way out and these stories need to be told. People need to know what really was going down here. Like, fuck it. She wants people to see the rotting stench that is Gilead. Okay. Now I'm going to do a spoiler warning right here. So if you do not know, if you haven't read this book yet, or you haven't got that far, and you don't want to know who this is yet, you want to figure it out on your own, stop it right here, and then I'll put the time where I continue not talking about it in the, like, I'll do a little title somewhere or whatever, okay? Okay. Now that that's out of the way, the person we were talking about, of course, is Aunt Lydia. So, I can't even tell you how freaking happy I am that Lydia is like a freaking, like, the unsung hero of this bitch. Like, because the actress that plays her in the show is so good that you want to root for her, but at the same time you're like, oh God, she's doing these horrible things, she's a gender traitor, all this stuff. But once you read this book, you're like, oh my God, this is why I love Aunt Lydia. Okay. Alright, moving on. Chapter 2, Transcript of Witness Testimony 369A. So this chapter opens up on someone who has grown up in Gilead. Not born, but raised in Gilead. Now she's being asked what it was like. So she really emphasizes that most of the children are treated well. And I quote, "I agree with you that Gilead should fade away. There is too much wrong in it, too much that is false, and too much that is surely contrary to what God intended. But you must permit me some space to mourn the good that will be lost." So, while she knows this shit's messed up, she also needs time to process things. So she starts talking about the outfits they have to wear and how the colors represent different things. While she's describing the outfits, however, it gets a little too conservative for me, by which I mean she talks about even as a young girl, or maybe even especially as a young girl, you have to be aware that men can't control themselves. So you need to watch what you wear and how you act. Let's discuss this. So, little girls can't even be little girls because they already need to be worried about men's advances? Okay, when I was 12 years old, I lived with my mom on a dead-end street, and I'd have to walk to school every day. Well, we had a neighbor, a male neighbor, who felt like he needed to whistle at me every time I walked by. I am 12 years old. I didn't want to walk by his house to go to school, but it was a dead-end street, and I literally had no other way to go. So now I'm feeling crappy and uncomfortable, and, like, if I tell somebody this, do they even care? I mean, this was the 90s. Alright. So putting pressure on women, hell, even girls, to curb a man's urges is bullshit. Are we really saying men have no self-control? And if we don't cover ourselves and watch what we say, it's our fault if something untoward happens? Fuck no. This is an insult to both genders. Is this how we want to raise our children? No. Self-control is just that. Controlling yourself in situations. Because the truth is, You only have control over yourself in any situation, really. And if you're raised right, it should be pretty simple not to advance on someone simply by what they're wearing. These girls are taught from a young age that the responsibility of not getting male attention unwantingly is on them. Like grown-ass man cannot handle their own wanton lusts. I believe this is just a cop-out. This is all about control. Control these girls and creating a more subservient robot wife. Now, have any of you read The Stepford Wives? Not seen the stupid movies, read the actual book. Because that book is fantastic. So I highly recommend Stepford Wives. All right, moving on to chapter 3. Oh, wait, are we still on chapter 2? Oh. Oops. So they have one aunt, Vidala, telling them all of this stuff about it's your responsibility to control men's urges. All the while they have another aunt, Esty, telling them not all men in Gilead are like this. And while this may be true, let's think about Nick. I feel Aunt Esty is just saying this because they're young girls who are about to be married off, and she doesn't want to frighten them out of doing their duty. I'm not saying all men are garbage either, but what I'm saying is girls need to be aware of predatory behaviors fairly early in their lives, and that's not right. Sadly, this is true for the here and now as well. We need to prepare our young ladies to be aware of the threats around them while also not frightening them too much so that they don't even want to go outside at all. You know, it's like a slippery slope there. So the girl in this chapter is from a well-to-do family. She's being brought up to be the perfect little wife and mother, learning petty points, silk flower arranging, and so forth, like all the hoity-toity stuff from the olden times, except, of course, no pianoforte, because you can't read. Okay? Meanwhile, the O'Connell wives, which is the middle class, they just learn basic things like sewing, just regular-ass sewing, and then they do paper flower arrangements, not the fancy-ass arrangements. Unless they're really pretty. If they're a really pretty econo lady, she can be upgraded to a better husband. Okay? So remember that. The girls here, though, at this school are automatically going to be married off to the top brass of Gilead. You know, the sons of Jacob. So this young girl's been told by her mother that she was rescued from wicked witches who were keeping all the young girls without mothers in a locked castle. Now, her mother had this magic ring that allowed her to save only one little girl, and she chose her. This is frightening to me because she recalls an actual memory of running through the forest holding someone's hand. Like, an actual memory. So this is a real memory of her real mother and her running through the woods. So remember this for later. Okay, now this is another spoiler warning. So if you don't want to know who this is, skip ahead to whatever time I place on the screen. Okay, so this is, if you haven't already figured it out, is Hannah. This is June's first daughter. This is the one she ran through the forest with, and they were both kidnapped and brought to Gilead. Okay, now her name has been changed to Agnes Jemima, but we all know her real name is Hannah. Okay, so now we're going to move on to chapter 3. Is it this time? Is it chapter 3 this time? Let me see. It's going a little slow on the... There we go. Okay, so we're still talking about the well-to-do girl. So she talks about how her mother, Tabitha, would play with her in her dollhouse for hours. Like, she clearly loves Tabitha, but she doesn't seem to remember her real mother. At least Tabitha raised her like she was her real mother for the most part. Anyway, while they're playing with the dollhouse, Tabitha is talking about the books inside, and this really got me, and I quote, "All the little pretend books on the shelves were blank, and I asked why there was nothing inside them. I had a dim feeling there were supposed to be marks on these pages, and my mother said that books were decorations, like vases of flowers. What a lot of lies she had to tell me for my sake to keep me safe. Let's discuss this. Okay, so of course you want to keep your child safe. Who doesn't want to keep it? Especially here, she's about 6 or 7. But there comes a time when informing kids of the world around them without trying to scare them completely, it's going to be hard, but it's important. It's important. You don't want to keep your kids sheltered so that when they go out in the real world, they are manipulated and confused about everything around them. So she talks about wondering what her father does in his study. She knew it was said to be important. Women aren't allowed in there because their small female brains couldn't possibly comprehend the complexity of men's work. This is what the aunts are teaching them. Aunt Vidala says that females are incapable of large thoughts, while Aunt Esty compared it to trying to teach a cat to crochet, which of course they all had a good laugh about it. Imagine a cat trying to crochet. They don't even have thumbs, except those weird cats that have the extra ones there. So this saddens me, to teach anyone, but especially impressionable girls, that they are lesser because of their gender. So she talks about how she does have a Handmaid doll, but since they don't need a handmaid, she doesn't ever play with it. And I think this is why she says it makes her nervous, because she's never had any interaction with an actual handmaid. She's just seen them on the street in a line, So here we see how envious she is of boys' freedom. She talks about how she has a wish that she could go on a swing. A frickin' swing. However, girls are not allowed because their skirts might blow up and people might look underneath. Think about how fucked up this really is. Not only is it bullshit because they aren't allowed to wear pants, but just the fact that they can't because their skirts might fly up and perverts might take advantage is disgusting. She can't take simple pleasures in swinging on a swing because she might be showing off things that are private. This constant pressure on these poor girls to be constantly meek and conservative is wild to me. Now, at night, her mother, Tabitha, would sing to her, "Now I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. 4 angels standing round my bed, 2 to feet and 2 to head. 1 to watch and 1 to pray, and 2 to carry my soul away." Okay, so here she tells us of her problems that she has with this song. First of all, she says, and I quote, "I knew they were supposed to be the kind of angels with white nightgowns and feathers, but that was not how I pictured them. I pictured them as our kind of angels, men in black uniforms, with cloth wings sewn onto their outfits, and guns." So she is being sung this supposedly beautiful story about your soul being carried off by angels after you pass, and instead she is picturing not only 4 men with guns, but thinking about how, what if her feet stuck out of her sheets and she inflamed their urges? This is the first problem she had. The second was, who really wants to think about dying in their sleep at such a young age? She thinks about her soul as a doll version of herself. She attributes her soul as the valuable treasure Aunt Vidala has told them they need to safeguard. But we know what Aunt Vidala is actually talking about, her innocence, their virginities. And that's the end of chapter 3. So we're moving on to chapter 4. Here we finally discover that she is, of course, Agnes, who, if you don't know who Agnes is, it is Hannah, June's first daughter, who was stolen from her and raised by a different family in Gilead. So the daughter she ran through the forest with while trying to escape being kidnapped in the first book is Hannah, Agnes. So in this chapter, Agnes starts noticing that she's seeing her mother less and less. She's always resting. So she starts hanging out with her Marthas in the kitchen. She has 3 Marthas. Agnes remarks that she likes helping them in the kitchen, and also, and I quote, "I always made dough men. I never made dough women, because after they were baked, I would eat them, and that made me feel like I had a secret power over men. It was becoming clear to me that despite the urges Aunt Vidala said I aroused in them, I had no power over them otherwise. End quote. So not only are we teaching these girls that we are the ones who need to curb their urges, but it's the only power we have over men. So this scenario happens to her when she's about 8 or 9 years old. 8 or 9. So what are they teaching their little girls? What are we teaching our little girls? Agnes talks marriage with the Marthas and how much she really doesn't want to which her Martha Zillow tells her, you can't always do what we can't always do what we want, even you. And her Martha Vera says, and sometimes we have to do what we hate, even you. Keep in mind, she's only 8 at this time. So she creeps up to her mom's room to get comfort, but she doesn't really get any comfort from her mother about that. I mean, it's her duty, right? To marry off some guy. Like, it's literally all she's got. Okay, we're on our last chapter, chapter 5. So it's now been confirmed that Tabitha, of course, is dying. So sadly, she finds out from one of her classmates, her friends. Agnes's Martha was talking about it to Shunammite's Martha. So this is where we are also introduced to her friends. Shunammite is of somewhat equal standing as Agnes's family, except Shunammite only has 1 Martha, whereas Agnes's family has 3 Marthas. So Agnes's family is slightly higher up the chain than Shunammite's. Meanwhile, her friend Becca is of lesser standing. Her father is not a commander, but a dentist, like the best dentist in Gilead, and all the families go to him. But he's just a dentist. And don't forget about this guy. He's important later. So Becca's more of a meek, subservient friend because of her standing, and Shunammite is more of a kiss-ass-for-favors friend, right? And Shunammite loves to give Agnes bad news. Anything that's going to tear her down a little bit, bring her down to a different level, make Shunammite feel better about her life. Anyway, so Shunammite tells her this horrible shit, and when Agnes gets home, of course, she immediately goes and questions her Marthas about it. And here's the truly fucked up part. Agnes is so sheltered that the Marthas are just like, sorry, dude, we thought you knew. We thought maybe your mother or father had told you. And then one of her Martha tells her, we must continue to hope. Quote, hope for what, I thought. What was there left to hope for? All I could see in front of me was loss and darkness. And then Tabitha died 2 days later. So Agnes is angry and brokenhearted, of course. She tries everything she has to picture the angels carrying Tabitha up into a golden cloud. But she's really struggling to believe it. And I think this is her real crisis of faith, which I can understand. Like, I went to church as a child, early, and I went for a long time, and I really tried to feel something, anything, whatever these people were feeling that would, raise their hands and praise the Lord, and I never felt that. I'm sorry. I'm not religious. I'm never gonna be. It's just not my thing. I think religion's about control, and I'm not about that. Okay, so that's the end of Act 1, Statue. What did everybody think? This is a scary world. It's scary because there's so many things happening in real life that are pushing Gilead, but the hope is we know Gilead's falling. That's what this book is about. It's about the end of Gilead, okay? Anyway, if you enjoyed this episode, consider subscribing to my channel, The Inconsistent Reader. Now, I didn't know there was already another person with the name The Inconsistent Reader. So, I'm the one with the picture of my face on it. But it's because I have other channels that's my brand. So I have the Inconsistent Gardener channel, I have the Inconsistent Crafter channel, I have the Inconsistent Gamer channel, and now I have the Inconsistent Reader channel. So I like to have my fingers in a bunch of pies. I like to do a bunch of stuff. But anyway, so that's the end. Thank you for watching this episode, and hopefully I'll see you when I do Act 2, which is called Him. Alright, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day, and I will see you next time.